You're pulled over, blue lights flashing, heart pounding. The officer walks up and asks, "Do you have any weapons in the vehicle?" What you say in the next 10 seconds could be the difference between walking away free or spending the night in jail. I'm going to tell you the exact 5 words that legal experts say can protect your constitutional rights in that moment. And trust me, most gun owners get this catastrophically wrong. Let me paint you a picture. You're a legal gun owner. Permit, training, everything by the book. You're driving home after a long day. Maybe you've got your firearm secured in the glove box or in a holster, completely legal in your state. Then sirens. You pull over. Officer approaches, routine traffic stop, right? Maybe a taillight's out. Maybe you rolled through a stop sign. Then comes the question that changes everything. Sir, do you have any weapons in the car? Here's where it gets crazy. Most people, good, law-abiding citizens, think honesty is the best policy. They say, "Yes, officer, I have a gun in the glove box. I have a permit. Everything's legal." Sounds reasonable, right? Wrong. Because what happens next is shocking. The officer's demeanor changes. Backup gets called. You're asked to step out of the vehicle. Hands on the hood. Pat down. Your car gets searched. Your gun gets taken for officer safety, they say. Suddenly, a simple traffic stop has turned into an interrogation. And here's the mind-blowing part. You cooperated. You told the truth. You did everything you thought you were supposed to do. So what went wrong? Let's talk about your rights, because this is where most people's understanding completely falls apart. You have a Second Amendment right to bear arms. That's clear, but you also have a Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. That means you don't have to answer questions that could be used against you. Now, some states have duty to inform laws. Places like Ohio, Texas, North Carolina, if you're carrying a firearm, you're legally required to inform the officer immediately. We'll come back to that in a minute. But in most states, you have absolutely no legal obligation to volunteer that information. Here's what the Supreme Court has said repeatedly. Silence cannot be used as evidence of guilt. Invoking your constitutional rights is not suspicious behavior. It's protected behavior. But there's a problem. When you say, "Yes, I have a gun," you're opening a door. You're giving the officer legal justification to secure that weapon, to search your vehicle under the officer safety exception, to extend the stop beyond the original reason you were pulled over. Constitutional law professor James Duane, a guy who literally wrote the book on talking to police, says this: even innocent people should never, ever talk to police without a lawyer. Why? Because anything you say can and will be twisted, misremembered, taken out of context, used in ways you never intended. Let me give you a real example. Guy in Louisiana, legal concealed carry permit, gets pulled over for speeding. Officer asks if he has weapons. He says yes, mentions his gun in the center console. Officer asks him to step out. During the pat-down, the officer feels something suspicious and finds a small pocket knife the guy forgot he had. Suddenly, he's being charged with carrying a concealed blade over the legal length. Thousands in legal fees, court dates, stress, all because he volunteered information. The traffic stop was for speeding. The gun was legal, but his cooperation opened the door to a search that uncovered something completely unrelated. This happens more than you think. All right, here it is. The 5 words every gun owner needs to memorize. When an officer asks, "Do you have any weapons in the vehicle?" you say this: "I don't answer questions, officer." That's it. 5 words. Calm, polite, firm. Not "I refuse to answer." Not "I'm invoking my rights." Not "Am I being detained?" Just "I don't answer questions, officer." Why these exact words? Because they're non-confrontational. They don't escalate the situation. You're not claiming some sovereign citizen nonsense. You're not being hostile. You're simply exercising a right that every American has. Now, let's be crystal clear about something. This is not about being uncooperative. This is not about making the officer's job harder. This is about protecting yourself legally. Because once you start answering questions, any questions, you've waived your right to silence. Courts have ruled on this. If you answer some questions but not others, prosecutors can argue that your selective silence implies guilt. So you stay consistent, polite hands on the wheel, license and registration ready, respectful tone. But when questions come, questions that aren't about your identity or the reason for the stop, you use those 5 words. Here's why this works. First, you're not lying. Lying to police is a crime, but you're also not volunteering information that can be used against you. Second, you're not giving probable cause. If you don't mention a gun, the officer can't use officer safety as justification to search your vehicle without additional cause. Third, you're preserving your legal options. If anything does go wrong, your lawyer has room to work. You haven't made statements that can be twisted in court, but, and this is critical, there are exceptions. Remember those duty to inform states I mentioned? If you're in a state with a legal requirement to disclose that you're armed, you have to comply, period. States like Ohio, Texas, Louisiana, North Carolina, Alaska, these places have laws on the books. If you're carrying and you get stopped, you must inform the officer immediately. In these states, failure to inform is a crime. It can get your permit revoked. It can result in charges. So what do? You comply with the law, but you do it smart. You say, "Officer, I'm required to inform you that I have a concealed carry permit and I am currently armed. My hands are on the wheel. How would you like me to proceed?" Notice what you're doing here. You're informing because the law requires it, but you're not answering questions beyond that. You're not saying where the gun is. You're not offering to hand it over. You're asking the officer to direct the interaction. This keeps you compliant while minimizing risk. In states without duty to inform laws, you still use the 5 words, but you need to know your state's laws. Ignorance won't protect you. Here's another exception: federal officers. If you're dealing with TSA, Border Patrol, ATF, federal agencies have different rules. The Fifth Amendment still applies, but these interactions are more complex. If you're traveling with a firearm through an airport or across state lines, you need to know federal transportation laws. And here's the big one. If you're ordered out of the vehicle and an officer is conducting a Terry frisk, a pat down for weapons, and they're about to touch your gun, you need to speak up. You say, "Officer, before you continue, I need to inform you that I have a legally carried firearm on my right hip. I'm not reaching for it. How would you like me to proceed?" Why? Because if an officer discovers a gun during a frisk and you didn't warn them, that situation can turn deadly in a heartbeat. Officer safety is real. Your safety is real. Communication in that moment can save lives. So the 5 words are your default, but you adapt based on the law and the situation. Let's zoom out for a second. Why does any of this matter? Why am I spending 20 minutes breaking down 5 words? Because your rights are under attack every single day, not in some abstract theoretical way, in real tangible interactions between citizens and law enforcement. Now, before anyone jumps down my throat, I'm not anti-police. Most officers are good people doing an incredibly hard job. They go home to their families just like you do. They want to stay safe just like you do. But the system they operate in, that system is designed to extract information, secure convictions, and protect the state. Here's a stat that should terrify you. The Innocence Project has exonerated over 375 people who were wrongfully convicted. You know what the number one contributing factor was? False confessions and incriminating statements. People talking when they should have stayed silent. But I'm innocent, you say. I have nothing to hide. Okay, let me tell you about a law professor named James Duane. He did an experiment. He asked a room full of law students, people who study the law for a living, to go through an average day and count how many laws they might have technically broken. The average, 3 felonies a day, 3 jaywalking, driving 1 mile over the speed limit, using a company pen for personal use, sharing a Netflix password. Technically, many of these are crimes. Now imagine you're in a traffic stop. You're nervous. You're trying to be helpful. The officer asks questions. You answer. You mention something, anything that gives the officer a reason to dig deeper. Suddenly, you're not just dealing with a traffic ticket. You're dealing with a search, maybe a seizure, maybe criminal charges, and all because you thought honesty would protect you. Here's the hard truth. The criminal justice system is not your friend. Even if you're innocent, even if you're cooperative, your job in any police interaction is to be polite, be respectful, but protect yourself legally. That's not paranoia. That's wisdom. Let me give you some real-world cases where these 5 words would have changed everything. July 6, 2016, Philando Castile, a 32-year-old black man, gets pulled over in Minnesota. He has a legal concealed carry permit. When the officer approaches, Philando says, "Sir, I have to tell you, I do have a firearm on me." He's trying to do the right thing. Minnesota is not a duty to inform state, but he volunteers the information anyway. He's being transparent. The officer immediately gets nervous. Within seconds, the situation escalates. Philando is shot and killed. The dashcam footage is heartbreaking. He was complying. He was calm. But the moment he mentioned the gun, the officer's perception of threat skyrocketed. Now, I'm not saying silence would have saved his life. There were many failures in that stop. But volunteering that information created a dynamic that didn't need to exist. A man in Florida, legal gun owner, concealed carry permit, gets pulled over for a broken taillight. Officer asks the standard question, "Any weapons in the vehicle?" He says yes, mentions his gun in the door pocket. Officer asks him to step out, conducts a search. During that search, the officer finds a small amount of marijuana, less than a gram, in the cup holder. The guy had completely forgotten it was there. Now he's facing drug possession charges. His gun gets confiscated pending the case. Legal fees pile up, all over something that had nothing to do with the traffic stop. If he'd used the 5 words, the officer would have written the ticket for the tail light and sent him on his way. No search, no discovery, no charges. Virginia, guy going through a DUI checkpoint, not drunk, hasn't been drinking at all, but he's got his pistol in the center console. Legal, permitted. Officer asks if he has weapons. He says yes, trying to be upfront. Officer asks him to perform field sobriety tests, even though there's no indication he's been drinking. Why? Because the officer now has a reason to extend the stop. The presence of the gun creates reasonable suspicion. He passes the tests, but the whole process takes 45 minutes. He's late getting home, stressed, frustrated, all avoidable. These aren't isolated incidents. This happens thousands of times across the country every single day. Let's talk about why people struggle with this. Why is it so hard to just say, "I don't answer questions"? Because we're conditioned from childhood to cooperate with authority. Teachers, parents, coaches, police, we're taught that honesty is the best policy, that if you've done nothing wrong, you have nothing to fear. But here's what they don't teach you in school. The legal system operates on an adversarial model. The police are not neutral fact finders. They're investigators building a case. The prosecutor's job is to convict. Your defense attorney's job is to protect you. But by the time you have a defense attorney, you've already made statements. You've already volunteered information. You've already waived rights. And here's the insidious part. Officers are trained in interrogation techniques. They're taught to build rapport, to make you comfortable, to ask innocent-sounding questions that extract information. Where are you coming from tonight? Where are you headed? Have you been drinking? Do you have any weapons? These aren't casual conversation. They're investigative questions designed to establish timelines, identify inconsistencies, and create probable cause. And most people fall for it because it feels rude not to answer. Let me tell you something. Politeness is not worth your freedom. You can be respectful without answering questions. You can be courteous without waiving your rights. "I don't answer questions, officer," is not rude. It's boundaries. And healthy boundaries are essential in any interaction where there's a power imbalance. Because make no mistake, in a traffic stop, there is a massive power imbalance. The officer has a badge, a gun, and the authority to arrest you. You have rights, but only if you exercise them. Okay, so you've used the 5 words. What happens next? Scenario 1, the officer accepts it and moves on. Most of the time, seriously, most of the time, the officer will just proceed with the original reason for the stop. They'll write the ticket or give you a warning and send you on your way. Why? Because they have quotas to meet, other calls to respond to, and frankly, most traffic stops aren't worth the hassle of escalation. Scenario 2, the officer pressures you. If you have nothing to hide, why won't you answer? Are you refusing to cooperate? I can make this a lot harder for you. Here's what you do. You stay calm. You repeat the 5 words. "I don't answer questions, officer." You don't argue. You don't explain. You don't justify, because anything you say beyond those 5 words can be used against you. Scenario 3, the officer threatens to detain you or search your vehicle. This is where it gets tricky. If the officer says, "I'm going to search your vehicle," you say, "I do not consent to any searches." You don't physically resist. You don't interfere, but you make your lack of consent verbally clear. If they search anyway, your lawyer can argue in court that it was an illegal search. But if you consented, even reluctantly, that argument goes out the window. Scenario 4, you're arrested. If you're placed under arrest, you immediately invoke your right to an attorney. I'm invoking my right to remain silent, and I want a lawyer. Then, and this is critical, you stop talking completely. Not another word until your attorney is present, because anything you say from that point forward is being recorded and will be used in court. Here's the question I know you're asking. Isn't this just going to make me look guilty? Short answer, no. Long answer, the Supreme Court has ruled multiple times that exercising your constitutional rights cannot be used as evidence of guilt. In Salinas versus Texas, the court did rule that selective silence, answering some questions but not others, can be used against you. But if you consistently invoke your right to silence from the beginning, that protection holds. Here's the reality. Officers deal with people who know their rights every single day, lawyers, judges, other cops, people who refuse to answer questions. And you know what? Those people rarely get arrested, because exercising your rights is not probable cause for anything. What gets people arrested is talking themselves into a corner, volunteering information, making contradictory statements, giving officers ammunition to use against them. So no, using the 5 words does not make you look guilty. It makes you look informed. And in a system where the deck is already stacked against you, being informed is your best defense. Look, I get it. This whole topic is uncomfortable. Nobody wants to think about worst-case scenarios. Nobody wants to view every police interaction as a potential legal trap. But here's the thing. Hope is not a strategy. Hoping the officer is having a good day. Hoping your honesty will be rewarded. Hoping that because you're a law-abiding citizen, nothing bad will happen to you. Hope doesn't hold up in court. What holds up is preparation, knowledge, discipline. You train with your firearms so that in a life or death moment, muscle memory takes over. You don't have to think, you just act. This is the same principle. You memorize these 5 words, I don't answer questions, officer, so that in the stress of a traffic stop, when your heart is pounding and your mind is racing, you don't have to think. You just respond. Because in that moment, the wrong words can cost you everything. Your freedom, your rights, your future. But the right words can protect all of it. Now, I'm not a lawyer. This is not legal advice. If you're facing a legal situation, you need to talk to an attorney in your state who understands your specific circumstances. But what I am is someone who believes deeply in constitutional rights. In the Second Amendment, in the Fifth Amendment, in the idea that free people should not have to surrender their liberties just to prove their innocence. And if this video helps even one person protect their rights in a traffic stop, then it's worth it. So here's what I want you to do. First, look up the laws in your state. Know whether you're in a duty to inform state. Know your local carry laws. Knowledge is power. Second, practice. Say the 5 words out loud. Get comfortable with them, so when the moment comes, they flow naturally. Third, share this video, because there are millions of legal gun owners out there who have no idea how vulnerable they are in a traffic stop. And fourth, drop a comment below. Tell me your thoughts. Have you ever been in a situation like this? How did you handle it? What would you do differently? If this video helped you, smash that like button. Subscribe to the channel for more breakdowns on your rights, legal strategies, and real-world tactics. And remember, your rights are only as strong as your willingness to exercise them. Stay safe out there.